Hello and welcome to Pat's Latest. I'm your host, Mike Gambardella, and before we get to the newest Patriots information that you need to know, please subscribe for our channel. Be sure to like our video and previous episodes, and be sure to jump in our comments and let us know what you think about what's going on in and outside of Foxborough as the Super Bowl is quickly about to descend upon us. 2024-25 wraps up, and the new league year will be on us before we know it. Let's jump into it first, going over to a player that we've talked a lot about, and that is T. Higgins. And we got a report on Thursday from Kelsey Conway of the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Bengals beat reporter, that there is some concerns around the T. Higgins potential deal in Cincinnati, as we knew that it potentially could be because and after they tagged him this past year, and how that starts to shape up with their salary cap issues, knowing what they have to do with Jamar Chase, having T. Higgins, having someone like Hendrickson, the defensive end, who's going to get Defensive Player of the Year votes here as well. But in an interview with Duke Tobin, their personnel operations director for the Bengals, he admitted that it's going to be hard for the Bengals to sign T. Higgins. He went on to say that we feel that we have the resources to do it, but it all depends on how the negotiation goes and whether they're willing to accept wanting to come back at a number that makes sense for everybody. That does not sound like a personnel director that is willing to break the bank for the top wide receiver on the free agent market this year. That is good news for the Patriots. The bad news is you're going to pay top dollar for the top wide receiver on the market, and it is not Justin Jefferson, it is not CeeDee Lamb. T. Higgins, we can admit, is not at the upper echelon of the wide receivers in the NFL right now. If it's not 1A, he would be 1B, and he has shown flashes. We've talked about the 2 touchdown performance in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and when he's healthy, being 6'5", the dynamism that he possesses in his skill set makes him an intriguing matchup nightmare to put out there for someone like Drake May. That said, with the new league year starting on March 12th, you're probably looking at a $30 million a year deal to get someone like T. Higgins. The Patriots can afford to do that. We've also talked about people like DK Metcalf, who have said New England is not necessarily a destination that free agents are after. You want to go down to Miami, you want to go to Las Vegas, you want to be out in California. Sure. You want to be on a rebuilding team that's up in the cold in New England? Do you want to be where there is history? Do you want to be where there is an up-and-coming QB1? There are both sides to this coin, which Elliott Wolf, Mike Vrabel, Robert Kraft, and everyone else will have to figure out. But at the end of the day, some good news for the Patriots that the Bengals are not immediately all in on one of their top wide receivers and potentially the top target for the Patriots in free agency. So Joe Burrow did come out and say, it is a need for the Bengals to go out and re-sign T. Higgins, but just because it is a need doesn't mean it's going to happen. And that actually segues nicely for us because Joe has also gone after some Patriots players, it turns out. On the latest podcast for Gronk and for Julian Edelman, they were talking about the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen and how Gronk and Allen had met up at tight end U previously and admitted that, while he was still playing, Josh Allen came after him and actually recruited him and went out to say that a lot of quarterbacks did, and they identified both Josh Allen and Joe Burrow as two quarterbacks that pitched Gronk, that said they could do great things if you came there and could help them get those teams over the hump. And it's interesting to hear that, when Gronk was there and even Edelman towards the end of his career, as Brady and Gronk did go on to Tampa Bay, and Brady did actually pitch Edelman to come there as well, got Gronk to go. Gronk had other options and had people coming after him. So Joe Burrow knows what it needs to get over that hump to get to the Super Bowl. Hasn't won it quite yet. But Joe Burrow, to that point, knows what he needs and the options and the wide receivers and the pass catchers and the weapons that he needs to be able to get it done. He had an MVP season this year and didn't even get to the playoffs to get it done. So there is a lot that needs to be made up to get a team over that hump. Joe Burrow knows that, and he knows that the Bengals will need T. Higgins to do that. The Patriots will continue to hope that the front office decides that they don't need that investment on the capital side when it comes down to money, and it opens that up for the Patriots. As we look at some other things that might actually fall into the Patriots' way, going on and talking about the draft on Thursday was Ian Rappaport on NFL Network, talked about the top of the draft, specifically the top 5 picks. And previously we talked about how the quarterbacks could be falling a little bit because there are some really talented players at the top end of this year's draft. That means players like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft, could potentially fall down. And we talked about what those scenarios are that could actually benefit the Patriots should a quarterback fall, and then they could actually trade out of that spot to build up more draft capital. From Rappaport saying that teams like the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, and the New York Giants have quarterback needs, and they know that. We've talked about how the Titans front office said that they will not pass on a generational talent at the top end of the draft. It is widely assumed that Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are the 2 that they would talk about. If they even decide to take one of those 2 players, and the Browns and Giants having their issues at quarterback, if they decide not to pass on them, and it is widely believed that the Giants, Joe Schoen, their GM, is very much linked in with Shedeur Sanders and would go after him at 3. Should the Browns decide that they need to make their mark at quarterback and go get Cam Ward, the Heisman finalist who had a phenomenal season and is regarded as the top quarterback in this league if he goes to, that means that Travis Hunter is falling to the Patriots at number 4. And suddenly a generational talent goes to the Patriots who they might have been taking at number 1 had they had lost in week 18 to the Bills. They end up getting the player that they potentially wanted all along anyways. So again, things continue to fall in the Patriots' favor. Again, we are a month away from the start of the new league year, a month and a half to be exact, and back in April before we actually get to draft season. But a lot going on for the Patriots and where those moving parts are. And again, free agency first. If T. Higgins comes, the need for that wide receiver is less there. So players like Tet McMillan that we've talked about, not as much of a priority, and the opportunity to get back into the first round and potentially lock up an offensive lineman, specifically a tackle, still remains while getting a generational talent in someone like Travis Hunter. Finally, we wrap up today by celebrating the 10th anniversary of one of the Patriots' most improbable wins in that Super Bowl, defeating the Seattle Seahawks as Malcolm Butler made one of the most improbable plays of all time, intercepting Russell Wilson on the goal line and sealing the win for the Patriots and Tom Brady. And actually, Julian Edelman on another podcast had Matt Patricia on, and they were talking about that play and having Patricia actually go through play by play how that's set up, talking about the install early in the week and wanting to have as much beef up front as they possibly could, whether it was Will Fork and Branch and Hightower and Jimmy Collins, having all those guys there. Brandon Browner even bringing it from the back end and a former Seahawk himself. And Patricia went on to say that he went through all these things and was standing next to Belichick and, was looking at Pete Carroll and waiting out that play clock to try and get it in before the headsets turn off, because if they get the check off of that, knowing that you'd probably give it to Marshawn Lynch and don't do it, that you're going to throw the ball. And they had installed Malcolm Butler to be there to be able to come up and jam at the line, which is what he did. But Patricia went on to say that was on the far side of the field. So he's looking at the left side and worrying about the open flat and not seeing anything that happened, which very much resonated with me because 10 years ago, I didn't see what happened. As a diehard Patriots fan, I was actually working down in Washington, D.C. at American University at the time as their men's basketball sports information director. And because of a snowstorm that had hit up in Worcester, we were supposed to go play at Holy Cross the next day. Our flight gets canceled, so we suddenly go from flying up that morning to then having to take a bus during the Super Bowl, and you're trying to watch as it comes in and out. It's a back and forth game, so me in a Gronk jersey sitting there as players in the back are trying to stream it on their phones, trying to figure out what's happening. And of course, we're fighting through a snowstorm, signals in and out. And I believe it was right as Russell Wilson snaps that ball, and you just assume that Marshawn Lynch is about to hand that ball off, and you just hear an uproar from the back of the bus, and you just assume that it's in. There's not enough time. It's not going to end well. My face went from this color to more of what it is under T. Higgins, Gronk, and everybody else here. And it isn't until a couple minutes later where you finally get service back to say Malcolm Butler intercepts the ball, and trying to process what that means. And it still goes down as one of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history, a key part to the Patriots dynasty, the 20-year run, and can only hope that what is happening now in New England is getting them back on track to where they were and starting to assemble talent. They have done so in the offseason already on the coaching staff and trying to get their scouting teams, their coaches up to snuff with everybody else in the AFC East, AFC, and NFL at large. And we can only hope that continues in free agency and then into draft season here as well. As always, we thank you for taking the time here to join us. Be sure to comment down below to let us know what you thought of this episode. Give us who you think the Patriots should take in the upcoming draft before free agency and who are the top guys they should go after, and let us know where we should stop by and give our comments on the next episodes as well. Thanks for joining us, and fight on, Foxborough.